Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. Pakistan has summoned Indian High Commission's Chargé d'Affaires to register its protest over ceasefire violations in Buxa and Nikyal sectors at the line of control. Indian CDA Garo Ahluwalia was questioned over the martyrdom of 4 innocent civilians due to unprovoked Indian fighting yesterday. The Indian envoy was told that India must respect the 2003 ceasefire understanding and maintain peace along the line of control and the working boundary. The Foreign Office spokesperson said the Indian forces have been continuously targeting civilian populated areas. She said Indian forces use artillery fire, heavy caliber mortars and automatic weapons. She said India committed 1,410 ceasefire violations this year, which resulted in 12 martyrdoms and serious injuries to 102 innocent civilians. Pakistan has expressed reservations over India's inclusion into the United Nations Security Council. In her weekly briefing, Pakistan's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Aisha Farooqi said India has been a consistent violator of the UNSC resolutions, which makes its inclusion in the body questionable. Farooqi said India violated resolutions regarding UN-supervised plebiscite in occupied Kashmir. She said New Delhi has incarcerated 8 million Kashmiris, including top Kashmiri leadership, with 900,000 occupation troops. The spokesperson said India is busy advancing RSS BJP-inspired extremist Hindutva ideology even during pandemic. She said India has disputes on all of its borders because it seeks to destabilize its neighbors. Farooqi urged the international community to make sure that India abides by the resolutions of the Security Council. Indian troops have martyred another civilian in Pulwama district of occupied Kashmir. This raises the death toll to 29 for this month. The civilian was martyred during a cordon and search operation in the Pampori area of the district. The occupation forces have sealed all the entry and exit points of the area and suspended internet service. Meanwhile, the Indian forces arrested a youth after raiding a hospital during a similar operation in the Jaklat Mandi area of the Islamabad district. The occupied valley has been under New Delhi's crushing curfew and communications blackout for the past 318 days. In Pakistan, 118 more people have died from the new coronavirus in the past 24 hours, raising the death toll to 3,093. The Health Ministry has reported more than 5,300 COVID-19 cases in a day, which brought the total infections to over 160,000. The Health Ministry said over 59,000 people have recovered so far, where there are nearly 98,000 active cases across the country. The ministry said the provinces of Punjab and Sindh have both reported around 60,000 cases so far. Khyber Pakhtunkhwa has nearly 20,000 cases, Balochistan almost 8,800, while the capital Islamabad has reported nearly 10,000 cases. Gilgit-Baltistan and Azad Jammu and Kashmir have reported nearly 2,000 cases. Brazil has recorded 1,269 COVID-19 deaths in the past 24 hours, bringing its toll to over 46,500 with nearly 1 million infections. In the US, 755 more people died in a day as the country's death count surged to nearly 118,000 with almost 2.2 million cases. Globally, the COVID-19 death count has crossed 448,000 with over 8.3 million infections. What in this report?
As surge in COVID-19 cases rattle governments around the world, Latin America continues to be in the eye of the storm. Chile has become a global pandemic hotspot with highest number of infections and deaths per million people in the world, while Mexico has reported 770 new deaths and nearly 5,000 cases in a day. In the US, President Donald Trump has ruled out any lockdown in the future despite record high surge of cases in 4 states. New York State Governor Andrew Cuomo says widespread testing is the key to containing the virus.
60,000 tests on one day. No state in the United States is doing that. 60,000 tests across the state. Number who tested positive? Less than 1%. That is the lowest percentage of positive that we have had since we have started, period.
The African Union has launched a medical supplies platform after 250,000 confirmed infections and over 6,700 deaths. The online platform is meant to enable all African governments to access critical supplies to combat the novel coronavirus.
We have an urgent need for medical supplies, testing equipment, as well as putting up facilities to isolate and quarantine people, laboratories, personal protection equipment, and equipment such as ventilators, thermometers, and others.
Meanwhile, as most of the European countries lift lockdown restrictions, Germany has announced to extend a ban on large events until at the end of October. South Korea is struggling with numerous new clusters of infections spouting as the country battles a second wave of the fatal virus. China is ramping up testing as 28 more tested positive, including 24 in Beijing.
Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi says that Islamabad will continue to play a positive role for peace in Afghanistan. Qureshi was speaking on phone to his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov. The two foreign ministers agreed to maintain close consultations as part of the regional efforts to support the Afghan peace process. Qureshi and Lavrov discussed the need for urgent steps to address the grave situation in occupied Kashmir. Qureshi said India's attitude towards its minorities is condemnable and Pakistan is deeply concerned. He said the Indian forces are killing innocent Kashmiris in fake encounters in the name of cordon and search operations. Lavrov also expressed support for Prime Minister Imran Khan's debt relief initiative for COVID-hit developing nations. The Taliban have released 35 soldiers and police personnel of the Kabul administration from captivity. In a tweet, the group's spokesman Sohail Shaheen said the troops were sent back to their families after providing assistance. The prisoner exchange is part of a February deal which the US had signed with the Taliban in Qatar. Earlier this week, the Afghan government and the Taliban agreed that Doha will be the venue for the first meeting in their peace talks. Shaheen said the group was ready to hold intra-Afghan talks within a week of the completion of the prisoner release. UN assistance mission in Afghanistan has expressed concern over the slowing down of anti-corruption reforms in the country. In a report, UNAMA said sustained and effective efforts in fighting corruption are critical for the country's future. In a statement, UN Secretary General Special Representative for Afghanistan said integrity reforms must be key priorities for the Afghan leadership. Deborah Lyons said a prosperous Afghanistan requires accountability. The report says fewer legislative and strategic initiatives were undertaken to fight corruption in 2019 than in previous years. Nepal Parliament's upper house has unanimously approved new map to officially declare disputed areas with India as Nepalese territory. The 59-seat House endorsed the new map amendment bill with 57 votes in support, while no one voted against it. In a territorial controversy with India, Nepal published its new map showing Kalapani, Limpiadura and Lipulek as its areas. India has rejected the map, saying it was not based on historical facts or evidence. The bill was passed by the lower house of the parliament on June the 13th. It now required presidential approval. The row over the map began last month after India inaugurated an 80-kilometer road, about 19 kilometers of which passes through the area claimed by Nepal. Iraq says 4 Katyusha rockets struck Baghdad's heavily fortified green zone, which houses foreign missions, including the US consulate. This is the 5th such attack in 10 days on the zone. The state-run security network said the explosions were followed by the sound of sirens in the green zone. It said there were no immediate reports of casualties or damage. The attack was carried out from a location near the Al-Rashid military base in southern Baghdad. This was the second rocket attack near the US embassy this month. No group has yet claimed the responsibility for the attack. Turkey says 4 people were killed in a Kurdish Workers' Party attack in southeastern Sirnak province. The provincial governor office said the construction workers were killed after a roadside bomb planted by PKK exploded in the Silopi district. The office said the blast occurred while the vehicle was carrying fuel to be used by workers involved in road construction. Meanwhile, the Defense Ministry said the Turkish forces have hit over 500 PKK targets in northern Iraq. Ankara launched the Claw Tiger operation on Tuesday in northern Iraq, Haftanin region. Turkey holds the PKK responsible for the deaths of some 40,000 people in a 30-year terror campaign. Senior Turkish officials have discussed a lasting ceasefire and political solution in Libya, as well as energy cooperation during their visit to Tripoli. A delegation led by Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu met Libyan Prime Minister Fayez al-Sarraj. Çavuşoğlu said he stressed Turkish support to the UN-recognized government of national accord. He said both sides discussed mutual cooperation in Mediterranean and steps Ankara will take in the region. Çavuşoğlu described the visit as very beneficial.
We have also discussed in detail ways of enhancing cooperation in every field. We have discussed the steps that will be taken in the field as well as political relations.
It's time for a short break. We'll be back with more stories. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Hamas has rejected Israeli accusations of smuggling weapons into the Palestinian coastal enclave. The party spokesman Hazim Qasim said Israel is spreading rumors against the Palestinians to justify its blockade against Gaza. He said Israel has chosen to divert attention from its plan of illegal annexation of the West Bank. Qasim said Hamas has the right to possess military weapons to defend its people against any Israeli military escalation. Hamas's response came hours after Israel announced that it had thwarted an attempt to smuggle weapons into Gaza. Tel Aviv said the weapons were coming through the northern coast of Egypt's Sinai Desert region. In the U.S. House, Democrats are circulating a letter cautioning Israel against annexing parts of the occupied West Bank. This comes as Israeli government deadline approaches for starting the annexation process on July the 1st. The letter expresses deep concern but fails to mention any potential consequences from Washington. It cautions Israel that unilateral annexation may harm its relations with Arab neighbors and European friends. Earlier, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson said Israeli annexation of the West Bank will amount to a breach of international law. He said his government strongly objects to the plan and will work to make the case for a two-state solution. Former U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton says President Trump pleaded with China's President Xi Jinping during a 2019 summit to help him secure re-election. In his new book, Bolton has accused the U.S. president of being driven by political calculations when making national security decisions. Bolton claimed Trump asked Xi to boost imports of American agricultural products to ensure another term in the White House. He said this took place during the last year's G20 summit in Japan. The book also claims that Trump downplayed last year's Hong Kong protests, saying the U.S. has human rights problems too. In response, White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany said publishing classified information is unacceptable. Earlier, the U.S. Justice Department filed a lawsuit seeking to stop the book's publication on the grounds of a non-disclosure agreement in 2018. In the U.S., the former Atlanta police officer who killed unarmed black man Rayshard Brooks last week has been charged with murder and aggravated assault. Prosecutors say Brooks was not a deadly threat and Officer Garrett Rolfe kicked him and offered no medical treatment. Prosecutors say Devin Brosnan, the officer on the scene, has become a state's witness, but Brosnan's lawyer has denied the claim. Brosnan also faces 3 charges, while there are 11 charges against Rolfe, who is facing possible life in prison or the death penalty if convicted. In Geneva, the United Nations Human Rights Council backed calls to investigate police brutality and racial discrimination in the U.S.
In all of these measures, we should go beyond existing recommendations. We need to build on what has worked, from the enormous body of work and experience we already have. Time is of the essence. Patience has run out. Black lives matter. Indigenous lives matter. The life of people of color matter. All human beings are born equal in dignity and rights, and that is why this council, like my office, stands for.
Earlier, George Floyd's brother, Phineas Floyd, urged the UN agency to create an independent commission to investigate racist violence in the US. Now, moving on, the China National Biotech Group says its experimental coronavirus vaccine is showing promise as it created antibodies in clinical trials. It said the vaccine induced high-level antibodies in all inoculated people without serious adverse reaction. The company plans late-stage human trials in foreign countries in a phase 3 trial in Brazil. China has 5 vaccine candidates for COVID-19 in human trials, the most in any country. China says it is resolutely opposed to the comments from G7 countries urging it to reconsider its proposed Hong Kong national security law. Senior Chinese official Jiang Jieqi said this at a high-level meeting with the U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo in Hawaii. Jieqi said that Beijing's determination to introduce the law was unwavering. Earlier, the G7 foreign ministers had called for China to reconsider this decision in a statement. They said they had grave concerns about the law threatening Hong Kong's rights and freedoms. They said China's move also violates its obligations under the UN-registered joint declaration between China and the UK. The Standing Committee of China's National People's Congress is set to reveal the details of the law in a meeting on June the 20th. Canada has failed to secure one of the rotating seats in the United Nations Security Council for a second time. Canada received just 108 votes, 6 fewer than it received in 2010 under the former Conservative government. In a statement, Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau congratulated Norway and Ireland for securing the required two-thirds majority. A total of 128 votes are needed to secure a two-thirds majority, with Norway grabbing 130 votes and Ireland bagging 128 nods. Mexico and India were also elected to the body unopposed but had to secure required two-thirds vote to confirm their election. Meanwhile, Turkish diplomat Volkan Bozkır was also elected unopposed as the president of the 75th session of the UN General Assembly.
Number of votes obtained.
Number of votes obtained, His Excellency Volkan Bozkır of Turkey, 178. Having obtained the required majority of members present and voting on the greatest number of votes, His Excellency Mr. Volkan Bozkır of Turkey is elected President of General Assembly at the 75th session.
Volkan Bozkır of Turkey.
In Colombia, 6 soldiers have been killed and 8 others injured after an alleged drug gang attacked an army unit. Officials say the ambush took place in the rural area of San Juan de Luzada in the country's Amazonas region. Officials said the army unit was undertaking an offensive against drug trafficking in the area. Health authorities said 3 of the injured soldiers were stable after suffering soft tissue and superficial wounds. Colombia's President Iván Duque called the fallen soldiers heroes and vowed to bring the country's violent drug gangs to justice.
6 men committed to the service of the country died when facing down drug trafficking, protecting our jungle. 8 men were wounded, violently attacked by drug traffickers, by these armed groups, these dissidents. And we will continue to confront them with full force. The public mourns its heroes. Colombia mourns in this situation.
In Antarctica, a 68-million-year-old fossil that looks like a deflated football has turned out to be the world's second biggest egg. More in this report.
In the year 2011, scientists from Chile unearthed a massive fossil on the Seymour Island off Antarctica's coast. Initially bewildered by it, they nicknamed it The Thing, after the name of a science fiction film. The fossilized egg, measuring 8 by 11 inches, had no embryonic remains, and the mother's skeleton was not found to identify what animal laid it. It is the second largest egg on record, and one that may have belonged to a huge marine reptile that lived alongside the dinosaurs.
Taking the hypothesis that it was a mosasaur, you can perform a study of the relationship that exists between current lizards and the size of their eggs and their adult body size, and you make an estimation of what the size of the mesosaur was. And these estimations say that it was an animal of at least 7 meters long and up to 17 meters long. So it really could have been giant.
The fossil challenges the notion that these animals did not lay eggs and gave birth to live young.
We started with the hypothesis that it might be perhaps some internal organ or some type of marine reptile. We also thought that it might be some seaweed that somehow rolled up when it was buried. And finally, it became evident that we were going to need a much deeper and more detailed analysis to be able to determine what it was.
Mosasaurs and plesiosaurs went extinct at the same time as the dinosaurs after an asteroid struck Earth 66 million years ago.
Asian Development Bank says India's GDP will contract by 4% in the fiscal year ending on 31st of March 2021. Earlier in April, the bank projected India's economy to grow by 4%. It forecast developing Asia will likely record its weakest expansion in nearly 6 decades this year due to COVID-19. ADB's revised projections came after World Bank predicted Indian economy will shrink by over 3% this year. Meanwhile, credit rating agency Fitch has cut its outlook for India to negative as COVID-19 has significantly weakened the country's growth prospects. Fitch maintained its rating for India at negative BBB, which is the lowest investment grade. Earlier this month, Moody's downgraded India's sovereign rating to lowest investment grade of Baa2 for first time in 22 years. The US says it is unlikely to reach a trade deal with the UK before US presidential election in November 2020. US trade negotiator Robert Lighthizer made these remarks as both the countries begin second round of negotiations this week. Lighthizer said Washington is looking for a comprehensive deal with London and will not settle for any limited agreement. He said the US will seek access to the UK markets for American farmers and termed existing British standards as thinly veiled protectionism. The two countries exchanged £230 billion worth of trade each year. And now the weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus News.